And we're live. There we go. Okay, so episode 34. I made the little snippet at the beginning that said crossing the streams, making fun of you guys because you literally seconds ago before I hit the live button were saying how I don't know what I'm talking about. And then I was making fun of you because between the two of you, you basically run the podcast portion of herpeticulture and have been very successful in doing so. But I put in the little snippet that I wanted to talk to you guys because I don't think it had ever been, or I had heard it framed that your stories mirror each other really closely. And I thought it was cool that currently you both are moving more into lizards, which played into my show specifically, but that you started out, got in herpeticulture because of your dad, and then you guys each went your own ways, but were pretty focused on snakes, and then really focused down either in Morelia, chondros, then diversified a little bit, and then now your diversification has moved completely away from snakes to diversifying into lizards, where I've heard you both make the point of it was bugs and it was feeding lizards, and then once you both made the point that once you kind of like committed and said, yeah, I'll get something that eats bugs. Now
puts
you
in the
both,
door, it's all over.
right. And because like
Yeah.
Justin, you had talked before that you'd done cresteds, but it wasn't so bug centric. And so it wasn't such a problem. And then Eric, you had a whole bunch of diverse background with your dad. And then you've kept all sorts of pythons, but it wasn't really lizard focused. And you both got your collections to the point where you were, feeding rodents, feeding quail, whatever. It had a system, everything's down. It was cool. And then I don't want to do lizards because of bugs. I don't want to do lizards. The setup's different. But then you both just bit the bullet and jumped, and now have kind of done a transition. And honestly, in a similar way, you both obviously had some Morelia interest, chondro interest. Then it went Australian, and then dwarf monitors. And so you're still following a little bit of the same track. Eric, you kind of have been talking about geckos quite a bit more, and then just kind of your influences, I guess, were a little different. Whereas Justin had a whole lot of gecko history, to where what he talks about a lot now is not necessarily gecko influenced. Whereas Eric, you had all sorts of diverse history, and I think you've even talked about your dad getting back into it a little bit. And so your jump into lizards has been a little more diverse. So I just wanted to come on and talk about it, and I thought it was a cool transition because a lot of folks that are very into social media and podcasts and things like that are snake centric. And then that was kind of the genesis of my doing this. And then coming into the herpeticulture network was I brought more lizard just content, I suppose, where like the guys at THP and Phil and those guys, like they know lizard stuff. They just weren't maybe keeping as much or talking about as much. And now all of you NPR and THN seem to kind of shift focus a little bit. And especially on the NPR network, you guys have a bunch of shows now with a whole diverse array of topics in herpeticulture. I just thought it was really cool. I didn't think I had heard anybody point out that you guys shared very similar story arcs, I guess.
Well, sort of the funny part of it is like Burke was an immediate influence into why I have Ackies now, because I had always wanted some. And then Monitor Keeping Podcast showed up. I started talking to Alan Stevens, Eric Burke there got some Ackies. And so then I was like, wait a second, Alan has some. We had Alan on the show at one point, and we had talked, like I had mentioned it to him, how I'd always wanted some Ackies but never pulled the trigger. And then, Eric got his, and I was like, you know what, if Eric Burke has the time to make it happen, why the hell not? So got me some, and I love them. I wish I'd got them sooner. But.
Yeah. How did I do it? I talked to Rob about it for years, and he just sort of like told me the bug situation, not knowing if I was ready to do it, and it kind of just made me nervous. And I guess I saw my dad doing it because he got back into it, and his first thing that he got was an emerald green skink. And he had this bioactive setup and all this stuff. And I'm like, how do you know how to do this stuff? And he's like, I don't know. I just put it together. And just like, oh, okay. I'm like, wow.
Pathos and a prayer.
Yeah. So I'm thinking, well, if he could do that, I could do that. So I got my first Ackies from Mike Brogna. And I was hooked, man. And Rob then influenced me again and told me about Kimberly Rocks. And that was it, man. Then I was done. They're the coolest.
I want Kim's because you got them and how much you talk about them. So it's like,
they're so cool, man. Oh, they're so cool.
Starting to think it's like that movie Looper, and like I'm just the young version of Bruce Willis, and Eric is the older version of Bruce Willis, and it's just
Get some Kim's, man.
I do. They are on the list. I've already talked to Alan about it. Right now it's just I gotta upgrade the Ackie cage soon. They're growing so damn quick, and then figuring out, you know, if I do get Kim's, getting them into like the setup that the Ackies are in now, and then upgrading them. So it's just the constant cycle of moving things, upgrading things, all that stuff. So
yeah, I love Australia. I've always focused on the python part of it, but obviously the carpet pythons being number one for me. But I mean, Australia is the land of the monitors as well, you know, and they have so many. And then you start to look at the geckos, and oh my God, there's so many awesome geckos. And I think I messed Nipper up because he was a snake guy too, and now he's keeping all Australian geckos. And it's crazy how we influence each other, you know. It's just
man. I think you guys. Well, I shouldn't say that is in such a broad thing. I think Owen is starting to realize it because I hear him complain about it in episodes sometimes. But between the two of you, and then the various other parts of the networks that you touch, I think sometimes you guys might discount how much you influence those things. Because you do, I think you do influence one another, and in our friend group and you know, circle of people that we chat with and text with and things like that, of course. But then, like with the Kims specifically, it's one of those things where a lot of people are interested in monitors. Oh, that's really cool, but you only hear about huge ones. And everybody has a peripheral idea that dwarf monitors exist, but then they always seem kind of expensive. Or you talk about Indonesian ones, and they either do kind of cool in captivity, but it's more chameleon style where you don't really touch them all that much or do a whole lot. And you start to lose like some of that insight of the personality part, the setting them up, and the different things that make dwarf monitors, specifically Australian dwarf monitors, really cool. And then the format of how like MPR and THP, the way that you guys talk is very conversational. It doesn't feel interview when either of you guys talk, and the co-hosts that you pick work perfectly for that because it's very two buddies talking is what it sounds like. And
yeah,
I think that's why both of you that's what you're seeing, is because when I listen to you, it just sounds like two people I know talking. And then you genuinely were excited, like, oh, these Ackies are really cool. And then I met Mike Stefani and he made these crazy things. And I met this dude. And then, you know, and you get somebody like when I was talking to Nipper, you know, it did the podcast with Nipper. And then we're just texting, like he's just some dude. He's very easy to talk to, very personable. And then you have that friend connection and you are very excited about geckos and you start talking. And then some dude on the other side of the world where you aren't, you know, day to day hanging out like in their life physically, just texts you and is like, yeah, I got a bunch of geckos too. That sounded really cool. It's because of the format, and I think it has a bigger influence because it's conversational and it actually sounds like your buddies are excited. Like, you know, this new thing they got, like, why is that a big deal? You know, you can see an advertisement or something like that. Well, that's meant to make me excited for it. So it feels like advertising. When you guys talk about it, you know, when I was helping Justin with the setup, and we were talking about the light and stuff, and like he was very excited. Oh, I got this setup. This is what I'm doing, and you could tell that. And
Yeah.
and it's a kind of a running joke. Like you hear Owen say those things of like, I need to stop talking about stuff. Like it makes the stuff I want expensive, and
I do feel partially responsible for the current price of Bairds.
For sure.
Have gone up considerably, and I'm like, I don't know. It might just be a coincidence. This also could have had a lot to do with me talking about them too much.
When companies talk about organic reach, like you see that in Facebook and stuff, right? Which says organic reach or paid reach or whatever. Like they are trying to formulate what you're doing, because you aren't talking about Bairds and you aren't talking about Kims because you are the wholesaler of Bairds and Kims. Like you guys individually are talking about things that interest you a great deal, and that generates interest. And it's just a different type of influence, I suppose. We all, and both MPR and THP, like kind of poo-poo the YouTube influencer. Like everybody hates that type of thing now. It's not, because it just feels like a used car salesman. You know what I mean? You can tell that to sell you something. You know what I mean?
Right.
What I think the original thought of all of that is what you guys are doing. That's actual influence, is because you guys aren't.
It's not forced.
Bairds
it's not.
You just cool,
I mean, it's one of those things like with Bairds. I could care less if people end up them taking off and people get more into Bairds or not. Like end of the day, I'm still going to have them and I'm still going to love them. The more for me if that's the way we're sort of looking at it, like whatever. But it's awesome that there's been people that have heard the shows and me talking about them and said, oh well, I've never even heard of those before, let me go check them out. And then they end up on their list of things they want to get their hands on, and whether they get them from me or they get them from somewhere else, whatever, they're all awesome. Doesn't matter. It's just they're awesome snakes.
Probably the first time that I experienced any kind of feedback of influence in people is probably with IJs, because when I was getting into carpets, nobody really cared about IJs. It was all jungles and jungle jags and all this kind of stuff and bright yellow and screaming, which is awesome. But I don't know. I just thought that like I wanted to be different. And these are cool snakes. Like why isn't anybody paying attention to these? And I just, Owen always poo-pooed them, and I was always like saying about how cool they were. And I don't know. And then all of a sudden, I see people getting them and talking about them. Like, back in 2007, there was like maybe a few people that really kept them that way and trying to selectively breed for them. Now there's a whole bunch of people. It's like, oh, wow. I mean, I guess that's an
even
influence.
then, when I was a teenager, I remember hearing about them and them kind of being like the oop. I had a glitch. I'm here now.
You're still there. Okay. You're good.
Y'all disappeared for a second. I thought Eric was done. I'm sorry.
No. Yeah, I'm good. Go ahead.
I was saying when I was a teenager, I remember like I got an IJ and I got it cheap. It was at one of the Repticons or something. And I remember seeing them and kind of thinking like the same thing. It's like, man, it's one of the carpets, but it's like kind of the gross one. It's kind of like the ones that come in and they're kind of like they just kind of look nasty and they're just kind of they're like the cottonmouths of the carpet world. It's just kind of gross. But
I guess it's
to see them go from that now to like, I think they're on the verge of really taking over. I mean, I think we already see that they're on that trajectory, but yeah, it was one of those things where I saw IJs and I was like, it's a carpet. It's the cheap ones. They're okay. Yeah. That was long before we saw any of what we see now, but
yeah, I think the cool thing about getting into lizards too is that it's new. It's learning all over again. It's pushing your ideas of reptiles that I never would think about, right? Because there's certain things you don't think about with snakes.
Yep.
diet and, supplementation and UV and, just even the heat scenario is just completely different. And, I don't know. I always try to push myself to learn as more or try to be better at what I'm doing. And I think that's the only way to try to continue to learn. And, yeah, I don't know. I'm having a great time. I think they're awesome because they give you immediate feedback, like when I go down into the Kims or the Ackies, they're there. They're looking at me like, what's going on? And I don't know. You don't get that from a snake, and it's like, wow, this is badass. This is really cool. So
like they're actually interested in you, but it's not just that initial food response. You're not just something moved. Oh, it might be food. Instead, it's like, hey, there he is. Let us out, feed us something. Like there's more to them than just the mate, feed, kill, repeat kind of thing.
Yeah.
See, I've talked about this a couple of times on different episodes, and then it comes up in our group chat and stuff quite often. I forget sometimes, or quite a bit, I suppose, that people don't keep the way I keep. And so, like, my collection is super diverse, and it just never occurs to me. It does as I talk to folks, but like when I first start out talking to people, and they'll come see the shop or whatever, and they walk in and they're like, "Wait, you have all of it?" And it just, because especially the way the industry is, and I've said before, it's wonderful now, where we have so much equipment available and so many different things to make quite a few species much simpler to keep. There's still stuff that's advanced or more difficult or delicate or what have you, but for the generalized species that are popular as pets, we have literally an industry set up to make that easier for you to do. And so when folks find something that interests them, smaller pythons, you get into crested geckos, what have you, it's very easy to just, all right, cool, I'm in this. I know how to make a wall of crested gecko things. I know how to make a wall of python stuff, and just rock out. And you don't ever have to leave that if you don't choose to, or if you're not exposed to it. And then, whereas for me, like I was working on the black box stuff today, so I was cutting styrofoam, setting UV and figuring things out and so on and so forth. And then my son was cleaning turtles. So now there's 6 or 8 pond filters in the sink, and we're doing stuff. And then my daughter was watering plants, so she had to move the one iguana that's obnoxious. And it's just, to me, it's do this and that, and this is different, and so on and so forth. Whereas, for you guys, I just think it's really cool to listen to people who, like Eric, has Morelia down, and when you hear him talk about it, it's obvious. Like, I know these things, and these come second nature to me, and it flows very easily from you. And then you are genuinely excited, like, this thing looks at me and gets food and is checking out this monkey, and it's a whole new experience for you. I just think that's really cool and you can kind of feel that at reptile shows sometimes as folks walk around and they're like, I didn't even know geckos got that big. And like everybody's first lychee, they freak out, or whatever. But it's just very interesting to be, when you talk about chondros or you talk about things like that's pretty higher level stuff for most folks in herpeticulture. You're talking about a fair bit of expense, especially a lot of the carpets and stuff, having been in it for a long time. Those things were quite expensive when you started, and lots of equipment and all these things. And so people would consider you to be, both of you, to be very advanced in your abilities and keeping and things. And it's really awesome that you can still be, oh, hey, this is really cool. Like, and when Justin was talking about setting up the lights and getting a heat gradient, and hey, check this out, and I'm going to try this, and I'm going to do that. And just, it's new stuff, even though you guys are clearly skilled, experienced people.
Yeah. I was just thinking as you were talking, and I think another thing that influenced my lizard experience is herping, especially with guys like Justin Julander and Rob Stone, because they look at the again, it just amazes me because they see the whole picture. They sort of have this like ability to sort of like just when we're out there herping and they just, you know, you bring up this species and immediately
they're
like
operating on
talking
another
about
planet
it.
existence.
And you're just like, what? What? But you know, especially Justin, because we both are huge fans of Australia. On those trips, you know, we would talk about pythons, but then we would shift into, you know, whether it's a blue tongue skink or I mean, that's another thing. I never thought I would keep a blue tongue skink ever. And this thing's like a dog. You know, again, that's like I'm walking up to the cage and, you know, open the door and here it comes, and, you know, tongues out. And I'm like, God, this is so cool. Why didn't I get this sooner? I don't understand, you know, but you know, stuff happens for a reason. But
For sure.
I think that when I herp now, I'm looking at like when we just came back from California, the amount of lizards that were there was insane. Whereas in the past, I would have herped and been disappointed because we only saw, you know, we saw more lizards than we did snakes, you know what I mean? And now, you know, we found we found the Coleonyx and Justin's holding it and I'm looking at it and I'm like, wow, I shame on me that I didn't even know that there was a leopard gecko that's in the US, you know, basically it's a leopard gecko, a US leopard gecko. And here it is right here. And I didn't know anything about it. Right. And here you're saying that, you know, me and Justin are on this advanced level and like, I'm like, no, no. You know, I don't know. But it's great, man. It's great. It's great learning new things. And
for me, it's being green or like being unfamiliar and like having that whole like you're starting back at zero with something is good to have. And unfortunately, I think we're sort of in a time, you know, with the internet and everything and Facebook groups in particular where everyone feels the need to know everything immediately, you know, just to keep up, if that makes any sense. Like if you're new and you like, you can't be new at something. You can't be green. You can't be, you know, like everyone feels the need to be at the top right away in terms of like knowledge and all that stuff. So to have something like the Ackies, which is something I've wanted since I was a kid, never had them, finally got my hands on some, and it was kind of like what Bill was saying. It was like, okay, like I got this set up. I'm messaging him. I'm messaging Alan. Like this is, you know, this is what it's looking like. This is where it's at temperature wise. Like it needs to go up a few degrees. What should I do? And like being oblivious again, I guess, is kind of it's not, you know, not saying any of this in any way with the snakes and stuff that it's, you know, I'm not completely jaded to it or anything like that, but just to same with the corn snake morphs, you know, going back to basics and sort of starting back at the bottom and the baseline of things and sort of having to learn your way back up. It's nice to have that because it's another thing that you can now spend time reading about and finding books and doing all this other stuff. So to me, I think that's important and I think it's nice to have. And I can understand why some people maybe not want to get into some of the bigger monitors that maybe they wanted as a kid as well. And, you know, like there are stipulations, but I think it's something that
sure
more people should do. Like, I mean, like I said, I don't want to go, I want my Ackies and then I want Kim's eventually. And that's pretty much where I plan on stopping as far as Odatria and monitors and stuff go. I had Uromastyx as a kid, and if I had space, I'd totally have some of those again because those were phenomenal lizards, and I know I do a lot better with them now than I did back then. You know, with guys like Philip at Airs Only, you know, seeing the stuff that he's doing only makes me want it worse. And to see someone that's like dedicated to it though is awesome. Like it's really cool to see someone like the Xenogamma. That's something that I saw at the Jacksonville Zoo a couple of years ago, and I haven't been able to get it out of my mind since. And to see him producing them on a regular basis and to have them and stuff, it's like it can happen. It probably will eventually. I don't know, but it's like it's just it's cool to sort of come into something with a different view and not knowing as much and sort of just having to relearn again. It's I don't know how to explain it without sounding like an idiot, but I think you get the idea.
Do you have sort of a nervous? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, Justin, do you have like a nervous feeling when you're setting the new species up and it's completely out of your wheelhouse,
Yeah.
like, yeah,
Yep. And it's like
it's like an excitement, but at the same
yeah,
time, you're like, oh my God, I hope I'm doing this right.
I could be doing this completely wrong. Yeah. And it was like,
Yeah.
that's like when I got the Aggies and I got the light from Bill, that Pro Soul and stuff. It was like, I had these giant, these 55-gallon tubs with the Python portal on the front from David Brahms and like the sliding glass fronts. I had a bunch of them. I got a bunch in my attic right now. And so like I set one up and I was like, I think this will work because I know they hold temperatures really well. I know they hold humidity really well, but it might also melt everything, and who knows if it's going to work or not. So it was excitement knowing that like, okay, cool, they do work. I can make this happen. Like I do have a lot of the stuff that I need to make it work for the animals. And it was just, it's building stuff. It's like the dart frogs too. It's building something and like watching it grow and take off and things like that. And overthinking the Ackies for sure. When I first got them, I was like, it's going to be, obviously they're very different from snakes.
Yes.
But within like the first like 2 weeks or so, I was like, I was overthinking this big time. They're really not hard animals to keep. And it's fun. And like to feed them by hand and stuff, like try and work with them and socialize them a little bit and sort of build that trust with them and stuff. Like you don't get that with snakes, it's
No.
To have that food on the tongs and your hand out and like watching my female just come charging out of the cage to that mealworm or whatever. And then she'll let me touch her for like 2 seconds and then she's gone again. But then she knows that I still have the food. And so it's like, it's that level of interaction that you just don't get with snakes. Like you were saying, it's
right.
I like it.
Yeah. 100%.
So Nathan in the chat was talking about Binos geckos and that they might make a good feeder for Australian pythons. Nathan, that is a common idea, especially for things like Antaresia. And if you have ever heard Phil Wolf talk about Nephrus geckos, that's also a really common thing for them as well, because binos are relatively easy to produce in mass, and Nephrus are known to be lizard eaters. So if you listen, he's talked about it in a handful of different shows on this show. He's discussed that as well. But yeah, it's a really good idea. But no, so when you hear, Justin and Rob, it are the way that they talk, and I think you guys are on the same. You have the same frame of reference, I suppose, but maybe they just have a broader knowledge base. When you hear them talk, they're like old school naturalists. So like the old school naturalists, when they were out on the boat and had to go to the next island or whatever, they drew and made notes on whatever, plants, birds. People talk about Darwin and the Galapagos, and then the dude's known for a bunch of finches no one cares about. Like it's not the giant tortoise. Like the finches were his jam. And then if you look at his notes and books and things, there's plants and all sorts of craziness. And we all talk about a really big turtle. he was, those people were so much more because they're just the only guy in the boat that cared about it at that time.
Right.
And so they had to be kind of everything.
He's looking at the entire landscape and not just the one animal that's in front of him at the time.
Sure. And when you hear guys like Justin and Rob talk, it feels like they're doing the same thing. What I think people miss especially in herpeticulture, but I've done reef tanks and different things as well. And really anything that is involved in captive animal husbandry, what I think folks miss when they talk about advanced is not necessarily keeping stuff that is delicate or, dangerous or what have you. It's a frame of reference. It's a mindset for things.
Absolutely.
And so like if you listen to Justin and Phil talk about venomous, they just keep going. Like some of the Snakes and Stogies episodes, it's just an avalanche of information. Like they know so much about this animal and where it's from and how to take care of it or how to handle it. Or I'm on iNaturalist, and then they were talking to guys from Africa, and then you move to Eric, and it's everything about Australia. I know all these things, where it's at, what it's like there, especially now that, of course, you've had the chance to go. And you already have the right frame of reference. It's just adding these pieces of information has now started to pique your interest. Like you had a wonderful naturalist frame of reference for Australia. And now you're starting to, oh, and then these geckos are here, and then these lizards, and which now means for rock formations and these plants, and you
Yeah.
hear, especially, and herping has changed how you. I don't know
100%.
if you look back on that or not, but like the way that you talk about things in your shows now has changed quite a bit from when I first started listening to you. Now that
Oh,
you
100%.
can tell that you're out seeing things, and how you describe things and talk about things, I feel like is different now. And Justin is kind of the same way when he talks about North American stuff and having the awesome reference of living where he lives, and you hear, Jake talk about herping, and he has really great references for rat snakes, for water snakes, and these things. And how you're describing them, you sound like a really old French dude writing a book in the 1800s. It's just that you're doing it on YouTube. So you already have that ability. I think it's become obvious that you guys are gaining new interests.
Yeah, I think I don't know. Again, herping is another thing that I put off for such a long time, and especially herp in Australia, but even herp in North America in different spots, and I don't know. There's just to me, the bonding that you get on a herping trip is 1,000 times better than any reptile show that you could go to, because you have a core group of people and you're basically living with them for the week, and you're going to learn things about them, and you're going to have conversations that you would never have in any other situation. And things are going to come up, and I don't know. And then you got the animal part of it, right? I mean, I guess at the end of the day, I'm just a nature person. I love nature. I'm fascinated by how it works. The whole cosmic octopus thing, and like I remember years ago talking to Rob, and I was like, Rob, one of the things that seems to happen is like, why in this part of the country can you breed with temperature cycling? Why in this part of the country don't you need temperature cycling? Why does this person use lighting and it works? Why does this person use humidity, et cetera, et cetera? Why is this person using food? And that's sort of where that idea sort of like came from, because he's like, yeah, man, it's just like I think we used to say like there's 5 triggers to breed a carpet python. If you hit 3 of them, then you're probably going to breed them, So, and now trying to figure that out with even something that like, breeding lizards just like scares the bejesus out of me, and it's probably one of those things that I'm just going to have to just work through. But it really does. It's making me nervous. Like the first time I bred carpets, and I haven't felt that way in a long time, because now you're like staring at that, situation and monitoring every little detail and taking notes. And there you are in your notebook. And it's even changed the way I keep snakes, right? Because here I am, like this little chunk of Australia that's, that I can come and stare at every day. And, I'm getting these reactions out of. Like I recently moved one of my diamond pythons upstairs, and I'm just watching, and I feed it a meal. And then every night I get to see it, because I'm sitting there watching TV, and I find myself not watching TV and I'm watching the diamond python. But like this little thing that I was watching, it's like the one night it was positioned in this way in the, in the classic ambush pose of a Morelia. And, the next night it's shifted over to another thing. So I'm thinking like, well, did it have no luck at this spot, so it's moving over to this spot? And then on the third night it moved to a different spot. And I'm like, wow, this is just crazy. I don't, and you just start thinking about all that stuff. And I don't think that I would have felt that way if I didn't herp and then take the plunge into lizards. I think I would have still been in the morph mindset, or the, how many genes can I stick into this or whatever. Now it's like, I don't know, that stuff doesn't really, it's not that I don't like it. It just doesn't draw me like it used to, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Sure. I think that you guys kind of described it a minute ago when Justin was saying how that female charges onto his hand and you get interaction and the blue tongue will walk up to you, and which is awesome, and that's why I love lizards. But it's also the realization that it's not necessarily that you don't get that from snakes, it's that you get what you just described. It's that it doesn't have anything to do with us. The
Yes.
reason that lizards are fun is because it can involve you. But then
Right.
but seeing that helps you to realize, well, I wonder if snakes have something like that. Well,
Mhm.
yes, they
Right.
do. It just doesn't involve you. And so it
Yeah.
can help you appreciate, I think, it can help you appreciate that more, just to realize that it exists. Some folks don't realize that exists. We get, especially um uh, you guys have both talked about certain snake species. When you're breeding them, it's pretty cookie cutter. Like we know what to do, we know how this works, and these things come out, and that's great. And
Mm-hmm.
it makes those animals seem simple, and because certain parts of their physiology are pretty simple and they're
Mm-hmm.
relatively easy to care for, and we can provide these things, and our equipment is good enough now that that's not very difficult for us. And
Mm-hmm.
so it makes it seem like the whole package is simple, when logically we know that that isn't true, but we don't really get to witness most of it. Whereas for
Right.
lizards, it requires us to do so much more work that we actually get to see. When there's a lot of crap going on here. Like, I constantly got to
Yeah.
clean this stupid thing, flips the water bowl, and there's
Right.
always this stuff going on. Like, you guys see all of that now because you are forced to. Whereas now like, you both have very sizable collections, and that's more work for the two of you. Like, to want to set your snakes up like that makes your life harder, not easier. But
Yeah.
now you want to see those things because you value them more, because you have a different reference point,
Yeah.
I
Well,
think.
being an
I
adult with a job definitely helps.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, it does. Yeah, I think you know, I guess the idea of I think I've let go of the idea of trying to be the person that, you know, the carpet python person, I have so much getting off of social media and then spending time in my reptile room has been so enjoyable. Um, uh, I don't know. It's, I used to spend all this time on social media, and I guess to a certain extent, snakes allow you to do that, right? You can't really do that with lizards, to your point, right? Because you have to be in there every day, and you have to be doing all these things, and um, but with snakes you can sort of like, you have like this downtime, and they don't eat for like this long section of the winter, and you're just kind of changing water and you're not really doing anything, and um I don't know, I don't know, I don't know how to explain it, but now I'm spending, and I think a lot of the guys like Justin or Rob that are spending all this time with their animals are gaining this knowledge. Keith McPeak is another one where, just the way his brain works and herping with him, and just always trying to figure things out, and he thinks about things in such a unique way because he has this bird background. So like with this,
For sure.
bird background and breeding birds and all these things, and he's worked with so many different animals, but like with that specifically, he sort of like has this way of like breaking things down and looking at it in a way that just seems so simplified, but yet it just fascinates me, if and I think that they get that knowledge from working with the animals, not being on Facebook, or arguing about whatever you're arguing about, or whatever.
True. Yeah, no,
So
that's absolutely true. And it is one of those things where it's wonderful that you can go online and learn the basics of how to care for hundreds of species,
Oh yeah,
all sorts of things.
yeah.
And but it, like, what I equate this hobby to an artistic hobby all the time. Of, and I use the exact same example, so it's probably getting old to people. But if you started out in an artistic hobby as a kid, like carving wood with your grandpa, and then when
Hmm.
you're a grandpa, you're not like a wood carver, you're probably an artisan professional, right?
Hmm.
But it's an exceptional amount of time spent in that pursuit, whatever it may be. And our hobby is very much that way, or it has always felt that way to me, because when you describe folks that spend a lot of time with their collections or are very observational and things like that, I feel that way. And so it, like I said, with keeping a diverse collection, like, it never occurred to me that there were people who didn't do that. And
All right.
and so when people, with, we do a lot of stuff with the rescue and a lot of newer people, and they come to our facility and are seeing different things, and they have all these, what I think are just really basic or simple questions. And I don't ever verbalize it to a new person because I don't want to insult them. But in in my head, I'm sitting there like, how do you not know that? Like, you've never seen a lizard do that? You've never seen a snake do that? Well, no, because they don't have to
Right.
spend so many hours a day in a facility that has 150 species, because that's just not
Right.
required of them. If you
Right.
only owned one, then that the cool part about having these type of pets is that they don't follow you around the house all day like a dog. They just do their own thing.
Right.
And so if you value
Right.
that, then you come to me and I'm like, you've never just watched a snake for 2 hours? And they're like, no, that's why I have a snake. So I just leave it alone. And
Right.
that's the cool part. And so it's just a whole different way to even conceptualize keeping itself, to where people go online and get, here's the recipe for keeping a sand boa or whatever. And then, okay, so I do that. And you can give that animal a wonderful life. And we have wonderful equipment now, and all sorts of things that you can purchase and set up, and good to go. It'll live its whole
Yep.
natural, wonderful life. It might not necessarily actually take all that much from you. And so if it
Hmm.
never occurred to you to now just hang out and watch it like a fish tank, then
Yes.
you're going to miss all of those things, because it was
Y-
so easy for you to set it up and let it live its life, that watching the
Yeah.
life part didn't, that light bulb never went off for a lot of people, I think.
Yeah. I think that's why I'm sort of changing the way I keep snakes, right? Because I wouldn't have thought about keeping them any other way than let's say, like the basic breeder approach of keeping snakes. And I just don't, now that I have a smaller collection with larger enclosures, you're able to see those things. And once you start seeing those things from your snakes, it's different too, because like if I'm keeping snakes that come out at night and they're really not active during the day, having, a blue tongue skink and, some dwarf monitors, I have that interaction during the day when I go into my snake room. And then even just in this room where I'm at now, the underwater saurus, they come out at night. You don't see them at all during the day. And yeah, I can go into my room now at night. Now I have something else to look at. The Ackies and the Kims, they're hiding in their hides or whatever. And now you see this other species. And I guess when I was a kid, my dream was to have like a zoo, right? To have like zoo enclosures and this beautiful thing that I could walk into, that I could escape the everyday world and just be with the animals and just relax and just sort of take it in and be able to, herp in your reptile room, so to speak. And I think when I was getting back into reptiles, it was this whole like it was sort of in that morph craze, right? So everybody's being a breeder and everybody's putting things in racks and everybody's going this approach. And I went that way, but I think I was never really happy about it because I wasn't, I was excited because I was breeding the animals, but that was really the only time that it was exciting, which made me want to go into the morphs more, because I wanted to see cool things hatch out of eggs, because that's sort of the excitement of the hobby, how it was. And, then I started seeing people keeping naturalistic and all these things. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's cool. And oh, wow, that's cool. Oh, I could never do that. I could never do that. And then I saw my dad do it and I'm like, well, what the hell? And it really just came down to the fact that I had too many things. So I had to slim it down so that I can enjoy the things that I really, really enjoy. And, working towards the goal of having like a zoo level type of reptile room stuff that I could walk. And it's just for me, right? It's for me. It's my little piece of Australia. I get to go in there and just sit there and remember when I herped and remember the trip we had and remember what we saw and watch a cool reptile do its thing, So.
For sure. Well, and like for Justin, like you kept dart frogs for quite a while and you were super successful at it. When I saw the stuff that you kept you did really well. And then like, I think you can hear that. So like Eric I'm going to slim down and set things up. And he's found this new interest and this is how he wants to go. Right. And then for you, like you already had a little bit of a diverse background and then you can see that it starts to color things. Like you talk about, I put pothos in water bowls, or you're already kind of more willing to experiment with things like that and see how stuff happens. And I have to wonder like that. Do you think that is because like, well, I had a full dart frog setup and you knew how to do plants and I knew ABG mix and you knew a little bit about that world. And then when you're setting up something a little more sterile, chondros, a lot of people, pretty clean puppy pads, so on and so forth. And you're like, you know what? How about I add a plant? How about it seems that you kind of mix the two.
Sort of. I think a big part of the pothos and the water bowl thing was just going to Pia and Cody's place, Reptile Preservation Institute, and they had chondros set up with, all their stuff is sort of this interesting, it's definitely not like sterile setups, but they're going and pulling branches from the trees in their front yard, hosing them off and putting them in with the mambas. And like when they put the mambas back in the enclosure after they've done cleaning it for, whether it was Carpet Fest or something else, because Cody gets into this crazy like cleaning mode where like everything has to be tip top. And so he replaces branches and other stuff. They do have leaf litter and whatnot on the bottom. So they are like, I guess, a naturalistic setup. I won't necessarily say bioactive because I don't know if they're adding isopods and all that other stuff. I think they are, but I don't know. But seeing that, and then when they put the mambas back in, you immediately see those animals checking out the new stuff. But then there's also with the pothos in particular in the water bowls, seeing that with green trees, and it's like, okay, well that actually, I noticed it helps with the ambient humidity in a Cambro tub. It helps sort of boost that humidity, and then it cycles air a little bit better. And it does make them look a little bit better. Makes a simple tub that maybe people in Europe that comment on Instagram posts, cough, cough, that complain about how horrible, your simple setup is for a chondro. It's like, okay, here, I added a plant. You happy now? Like, they look better. The snakes don't seem to care about them at all, but I think it does help with humidity and stuff like that. And I don't know. It's just an easy addition that sort of just adds a little more pizzazz to something rather basic.
For sure.
I forgot about Cody and Pia's place. That was another place where, seeing how they kept their animals just blew me away. Like, I'm just like, wow, I suck. I need to up the game, and I forgot about that at Carpet Fest.
Yeah, it's just, I think what I learned the most from that and helping them out and stuff was just, it doesn't have to be this super elaborate, like giant foamed background, just like
Yeah.
decked out to the nines kind of enclosure to make it look good and naturalistic. They, like I said, they're going and pulling bundles of like these oak branches from their front yard, rinsing them off real good, and then just putting them in the cage. And it's like, okay, yeah, there might be a bug or something on it, but it's not that serious. Like, it's not going to affect the animals. And so just seeing that, it's like, it doesn't have to be anything over the top. It can be something as simple as that. And it's twofold, you're making it look good. It is a form of enrichment for the animals. It kind of gets the gears turning a little bit more. That's the whole sort of bioactive versus sort of simple setup thing is, it's not nearly as black and white as that, because there is a happy medium. But they're just, you can make something look good and not have to go all out and throw a bunch of money at it and just make it this over the top thing. And I learned that with the dart frogs too. I'd have, like, initially when I set up my first frog tank, it really wasn't anything extreme. It was a bromeliad and some other like philodendron and some begonia and stuff like that. And eventually that tank just grew out perfectly. It didn't need the background or anything growing out of it. It filled out really well. The frogs loved it. They did great. They bred like crazy. And it was, none of those plants were anything exquisite or rare or anything like that, but it looked good and it did the job. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I just did that the other day. I went to the hardware store, got some begonias and a handful of just small little stuff. Like, when it comes to that stuff, like it really doesn't have to be spectacular like that. So having the facility makes it a little weird for us, because I talk to a lot of folks that do zoological things, and the crazy part of talking to them is, like, a huge portion of their budget is landscaping, and it's not even landscaping in where the animals live. It's just landscaping for people to walk around so that it looks nice, like when they're walking to the next thing with a giraffe in it.
Yeah.
And the giraffe is just like a barn with a big old horse pen that it walks in. Like, it's not a savanna, because the thing is humongous. And so it's like, we human beings, especially human beings in Western society, like, we get really stuck in the aesthetics of stuff like that. Whereas I love dart frogs, especially because if you look at herping trip pictures of dart frogs, it's just some dirt on a path. It's usually right by the sign.
Yeah.
And the dude looks down and he's like, there's like 10 frogs right there. That guy's not in the jungle. He's by a boat. He just walked off.
Right.
Like, half of the herping stuff we do is on the road. Like, you should take all Western species of rat snakes and put pavement in their enclosure, and then only look at them at nighttime, and it would be the exact same thing. Like that. That's, all of that aesthetic stuff is strictly for us. Like, it's not. There are some, ambient humidity in species, amphibians and things like that there are requirements, of course, but like, none of my iguanids have real plants because they eat them.
Yeah.
Like, you just can't. I can't. I would need my building to be split in half for the two species in order to have enough space that they wouldn't just eat through the plants in a few days, because they're herbivorous. Like, it's just not possible. And so the whole thing is just, it's just a painted background. Like, it's not fancy because the stupid thing eats them, and like with Phil, especially keeping so many venomous things, he was, a lot of the stuff that he seemed to be doing was those pictures. And he puts pictures on the back of his enclosures, because maintenance and stuff like that becomes a real issue when you have venomous animals. So, to give himself that nice aesthetic look without so much of the hands in their maintenance, he's chosen to use those picture backgrounds. And like, that's turned out awesome.
Yeah, I was thinking about that as well, because having been to, say, the Northern Territory and seeing what an Aki environment could look like, and have taken pictures myself and been there and stood there and I didn't find an Aki, but Akis are in this area, so to put that in the back of a cage that, you can look at the animal and then remember that exact spot. To me,
Yeah.
that when Phil started
Be
talking about
amazing.
that, I was like, wow, that's pretty freaking cool, So, but
I mean, that's what I was doing when we were in Texas. I saw, the cuts and stuff, and it's like, this is where bears are. I took pictures of the cuts and stuff, and just seeing the plants growing out of them and all the crevices and just the habitat itself. It's looking at that larger picture, like we were talking about before.
yeah, I think too. I'm assuming that the whole Australia thing was influenced by Steve Irwin when I was growing up, and I'm assuming that it has that to it. But to me, Australia has like this feeling to it that's just like it's just from a different time. I
Mhm.
don't know how to explain it. I don't know how to put it in words, but it's a feeling that you're like, it's it just, I don't know. And it's got the coolest reptiles on the planet. I mean,
So
in my
when I
opinion.
hear most of you guys talk about Australia, it's it's when like late 50s, 60s cinema, the romantic idea of the American Southwest or the American West.
Mhm.
To hear a lot of for you guys when you describe those things, it seems very similar in that it's
Mhm.
very open, very a lot of the arid landscape and a lot of the same themes. And it was a thing too where like culturally, like there were still ranches and it wasn't urban. It was very different from the eastern part of the United States, for that
Yeah.
romantic West. And now in the quote unquote developed world and all these things, when you get someplace like it, going to Australia is like going to Texas. You don't have any concept of how gigantic it is.
Yeah.
And then you're
Yes.
there and it's like, oh, this is the kind of place where you can still have a cattle ranch that requires a helicopter, like
Yeah.
humongous, just huge. And that's a really unique thing for people to experience. And then for us, we are into the details of that landscape. We're into geckos
Yes.
and we're into all these little bits and parts, which makes you look at it and in just a different lens. Like, oh, that's really cool, like that wonderful giant rock formation, and it's red,
Mhm.
and it's like, well, I know there's cracks in there full of lizards, and I bet you I could, you
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
so much more into it.
Well, you also
Like,
see that landscape, and it makes more sense as to why the animals in that area are a certain color or a certain pattern. You see
oh yeah,
it all, and then it makes more sense when you lay your eyes on it. Like pictures can only do so much, but when we saw
Yeah.
the pink goat whip in Lajitas when we were there, you see that outside of that in someone's hands in a picture, you're like, okay, it's pink. Like that doesn't make any sense. But then you see it in the context of like a hill full of rocks, and a lot of those rocks are some sort of red or pink. And if you saw that, if that coach whip was curled up right next to one of those rocks, you wouldn't even notice it. Then it
Yeah.
makes more sense. And then because I always thought that when I saw like pink coach whips, I'm like, there's nothing else pink in the area. That doesn't make any sense. But then when we saw one, it was like, okay, that now I get it.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by, the other part of Australia for me is I'm fascinated by just the Aboriginal art and that the being in a place where people have lived, 10,000 years ago and,
Mhm.
They lived off this land and, it's just fascinating. I remember when we went to Chillago and, just watching these skinks, and again, this is sort of how like these little moments of things that happened over the past, say 5 to 6 years that have influenced me to where I am now is, I never would have, if I walked through a reptile show, I never would have looked at these skinks. I just would have kept going, whatever. It's a brown skink. But watching them in Chilgo on rocks as the male's defending its rock and the female's jumping over, and then this other male's coming and he's fighting off that, this guy. I'm just watching it right in front of me and like, I'm just like, oh my God, this is so cool. Like what, you know, I don't know. It's, I love it. You know,
For sure. Well, that's,
Yeah.
do you guys follow Frank Reitz on social media at all? Either of you guys?
I know who he is, but I don't follow him.
I
no.
don't know if I do or don't.
So Frank Reitz, for those that don't know, he was an incredibly successful monitor keeper and breeder, and he was really active in the kingsnake.com forum days. And he now is also still very active on social media, but the stuff he's active on social media for is natural history type things and observations. And he literally just did this. He made a Facebook post and how he had went out for something else, and he had some other thing in mind. He's a birder, and he does lots of natural history things. And he said, oh, I went out to do something, but what I did was I spent 3 hours over in this rock pile, and it's literally a photo montage of what these lizards were doing for the day. And he just followed around these two Scaloporus and just photojournaled their life. Like it was,
That's awesome.
but like this is a dude that has had croc monitors and lace monitors and like every varanid you could ever think of, and a bunch of species people haven't even heard of, and has bred generations, is like incredibly successful with all these things. And his Facebook post, he's an older dude now, so he has spare time for a lot of these things. He had, I mean, so many pictures of these two lizards, like, and here she is in the shade, and I thought she was gravid, but this male's kind of fat, and like he's just going through, like, yeah, and then they went to this
Right.
bush, and it was ridiculous, like how in depth it got. It looked like a Seinfeld episode of like what was good. It was so cool, but and that's a guy that, as far as lizards go, has done everything. Everything you could think of that's cool, that guy has done. And
Right.
that's how he blew like a whole afternoon. Like that's amazing.
Yeah.
I think that's sort of a differentiating factor in a sense. You know, I don't want to sound snobby or anything like that, but it's similar to, I guess, cigars, where it's like there's guys that smoke cigars and then there's cigar smokers. You know, there's the guys that enjoy one on occasion, and then you have the guys that are all out nerds, know everything about the blend, like they keep up with things. Same with snakes and herpetoculture in general. There's like people that are casual keepers, and then there's people that see stuff like that and feel compelled to spend that amount of time looking at things and reading natural history and like really diving deep into more than just the species and how it's being cared for. Like I think that's something that myself, like the three of us, you know, and most of our friends and stuff, like they're in that same boat where it's like they want to know more than just how to keep something. You know, like Eric's going to look into stuff in Australia. He got the book on the like Australian landscapes not that long ago. It has nothing to do with herps.
No.
But you find a way to tie it to herps and what you can take from that and how you can apply it. And, you know, it's that always asking questions and stuff too. Like, why does this look like this? Why does this do this during this part of the day? Like, there's another sort of doorway you go through that is much bigger than any particular species that you're keeping.
Yes. Yeah.
As evidenced by the library behind you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a nerd.
Yeah, it's yeah, I you know, I don't know. I mean, I say it a lot on NPR because I just feel so compelled to have people not make the same mistake that I did with getting out into the field, to where whatever species you keep, doesn't matter. Just go there, you know, and you know, don't buy another snake, you know, or another reptile. Hold off on it. Save up your money. And I promise you, you will take something away from that trip, right? Because, you know, whether it's carpets in Queensland or Bairds in Texas, when you're there and you're in the environment and you're feeling the heat and you're feeling the humidity and you're feeling what the sun feels like and you can, feel what it's like inside the cave, and I'm temp gunning and UV this and that and all this stuff just to have to connect the dots in my brain, right? I remember reading the complete children's Python book, and when I came back from the Northern Territory, I reread it, and when I reread it, all the places that they're talking about to where they found, had sightings of this, or the picture that they had was from this area or that area. And I'm like, well, I was there. Oh, wow. I was there. Oh, wow. I was there. And then, immediately that picture of that environment flashes in my brain. And I'm like, okay, I didn't see a children's python there, but I now know why it would be in that environment, to what you were saying earlier, Justin, to why, they look a certain way. And I think that's why the naturalistic group of people that are or how herpetoculture is sort of maybe trending to move towards that way. I don't know if it's just the people that I'm around that sort of are moving that way, or if it's just in general it's moving that way. I'm not really sure, but I think that they don't really care so much about morphs, because when they're looking at, a coastal carpet python, or probably, or a Kimberly rock monitor, right? You think about how it looks in that environment and you want to replicate that environment. You spend all this time, like, doing the background to look like, someplace in the Northern Territory, or, and then you don't want to put an albino animal in that. You want it to blend into the background that you're making, So I think that's why I sort of don't really, I mean, morphs are cool. I like looking at them, but I'm not as driven to sort of make them be the center of my world with reptiles.
Well, I think at the very least you get an appreciation for not just a single species, but the overall like herpetofauna of a general area. Like when we went to Texas, I had never seen night snakes, the Hypsoglenna.
Dude, aren't they cool?
Dude, they are the coolest. And I want them so bad now. They're the most unassuming, like, really, I saw some at Daytona last year for like $30 a piece, and I was like, no one's gonna buy those because people are gonna see them. They're like, what the hell is that? And it's like the coolest little lizard hunting, rear fanged,
amazing.
And we saw a ton of them. We got to play with them while we're there because they don't bite, and they're just these cool little like cat snake looking, weird shaped miniature boiga kind of things. And it's like you build an association now. Like when I see horn lizards, I had never really cared about horn lizards, but catching those when we were in Texas was the highlight of the trip for me. Like I went and got a book on horn lizards because I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. Like, how come I didn't care about these things before? And it wasn't even, it was like, it was chasing them around. That was kind of the fun part because they're fast as hell. Julian are getting burned on the muffler pipe. That's always going to be an association with horn lizards now. When I think of those, I think of Julian scalding his arm on the muffler under the car. But that's like, now that's a group of lizards that I have a real interest in. I'm never going to keep any, but like I see them on Instagram now and I see other people seeing them and I get excited because it's just, they're so cool, and having your hands on them and like seeing the habitat they were in and all the ants and stuff that we saw that they typically eat on. Like when I saw the ants, I immediately wondered, are these the ones that they're eating? And that's why there's so many of them here, because those they weren't even ant mounds. They were just like holes in the ground with these giant ants. And so I'm like, maybe that's why there's so many of them, because that's what they're eating, but they're huge. And so it's like, they're not big lizards, but it's stuff like that. I didn't have an appreciation for those. I didn't have an appreciation for night snakes. Even like the giant millipedes that were everywhere on the cuts at night. It was like, I don't know what they are, but they were pretty cool. And seeing them was interesting because they're everywhere. I think you when you go somewhere for a species that you're interested in, we didn't find any beards, but that's okay because the trip was awesome. I have a better idea of what they're living in now, and I have a better appreciation for them and how tough they are in the wild. Same with Casey when he went to Alice Springs and saw Brettles. It's like you get such a deeper appreciation for these things when you do what you were talking about. Go to where they're native and see if you can find them, and if not, take as much information and mental photographs as possible, actual photographs, all that stuff. It just, I 100% agree. It's like the corns here too. To me, like South Carolina, at least my area down here in the bottom corner on the coast is like corn snake Mecca. Like this is where the best of the best come from. And being able to look at the ones we have here and then think back to Caulfield and when the Okatee Hunt Club was in full swing way back when, and people were coming from all over the country just to catch the corn snakes we have here. Like I have a better appreciation for them because it's like this used to be the spot. It still is.
Yeah.
But it's awesome that there's like a history behind it too. So
yeah, I think this last trip we went to the Southern California trip, night lizards, didn't even know what they, never heard of them, had no idea what they were.
Yeah,
Justin's
cool.
like, check out these night lizards, and I'm like, what the hell is this? It's like a gecko monitor lizard mix.
Yeah.
Like, can't take it. What it was just crazy, And then I remember we were talking in a chat or whatever, and I was saying to Rob, I was like, I really like these night lizards, and I only saw like a brief glimpse of it, and we're looking through all these cracks, and like we spent hours looking for these things, and then there was another lizard that Justin was super excited about, and I watched them as well. They're basically like a Pilbara rock monitor of Southern California, and like when you start equating, I think the thing too is like for me, it's like I got excited because they said Pilbara rock monitor, right? And I was like, oh, Pilbara rock monitor, what are you talking about? And now I know like Coleonyx and leopard gecko. So I'm like, well, what other lizards am I missing out on because I'm not paying attention? And now, you said Pilbara rock monitor, and I love them. So I got to love these things. And I'm looking at, and we're just, again, watching them jump from rock to rock as the sun's going down. And, anyway, we're talking in chat. Rob's like, oh yeah, there's a book on night lizards. You should pick it up. And I picked it up, and I'm like, what the hell? Had no idea.
New world.
Yeah. And I'm like, wow, something else that I need to learn about. It's just, and just keep peeling away the onion, I guess,
Well, we were recording. So before earlier today, like the next 5 questions is going to be with the Podfather there. And that was something we had kind of talked about in between questions, was like, native species often sort of get written off as like, yeah, it's native species, cool, we have them in our own backyard. But I was talking to Eric about how if you look at things through the scope of like, this is exotic to someone else, one man's a Knowles, another man's perenni kind of thing. Like Texas for me, like that might as well have been another country. I've never been there. Everything was new, everything was unfamiliar. That was enough. Like, yeah, I'd love to go to the Western Ghats. I'd love to go to Costa Rica. I'd love to go to all these places, but it's like there's also plenty of other places in the country that I'd love to go check out because it is new to me. It is exotic to me. Like, even though it is here at home, even the native species we have here, it's like corn snakes. Like, how many people in Europe and Asia would love to see a wild corn snake? A ton.
Yeah.
Yellow rats, like the basic stuff that we just, like I said, we see it. Black racers, for me, I see black racers, I'm kind of like, meh, like they're cool, but there's someone somewhere that would murder to see that black racer just doing its thing. And so that's part of the appreciation factor there, is just like realizing that we do have cool stuff here, just because it's not in Thailand or Australia or New Guinea or anything like that doesn't mean that what we have isn't special. I mean, you look at like Scott and Nipper, who are, rattlesnakes. Yeah. For some people, it's like they see an Atrox, they're like, it's the squirrel of Texas. They're everywhere. Like, whatever, but it's cool to see, like, for, same thing. Like for me, I don't see Atrox here. And so to see them when we were there, it was like, this is cool.
Yeah. We're about to do a field herping podcast about herping your backyard. And,
awesome.
I was talking to Nipper about it, and I was like, Nipper, I really feel drawn to sort of do this episode because I think that a lot of people think you have to go to these exotic places to sort of find reptiles. And I don't think that people realize that you got reptiles just right out your back door, and like, if you take the time to sort of find them, look at them, learn about them, I'm sure you'll probably have a whole new appreciation for them. And the thing about herp in your backyard is that you're able to you already know what it feels like. You already know, what it feels like when the winter comes, or, when a big rainstorm comes, and you know how the environment reacts to that. And if you're more tuned into it than before, now you're going to see it in a whole different way. Whereas I think today, in today's world, we're so phones and technology and TV, and you're so out of touch with nature that, to me, when we go on these herping trips, I get to plug back in, and it gives me a sense of calm. Or I don't, and it's not like you're resting or relaxing, man. You're climbing mountains, and you're not sleeping, you're eating shitty food, drinking shitty coffee, and you somehow just keep pushing through it. But at the same time, it gives me this sense of peace, I don't know. Yeah.
That wasn't the nice thing about Texas, was like we were out of service in a lot of the spots, and it was like I didn't even care. It was like this is all like Big Bend in the middle of the night. Like that was, to me, I will remember that for a very long time, because that was just very surreal. Because you guys were, like 150 yards down in that little gully or whatever, and I was up just trying to find something on the little higher areas. And I just remember it was like 1 a.m. and I'm just like, I'm in the middle of Big Bend in the middle of the night. It's nice and windy. It's not super hot. And I was like, this is just really freaking cool.
Yeah. 100%.
Well, like we just had that in the group chat with some of the folks in the network, and they were sharing that they were herping in different places. And I live in Illinois, so it literally just got warm yesterday. And, they were sharing super cool pictures and Texas and Georgia, and there's folks from all these warm weather places that are in the chat. And it's always really cool species. And I was scrolling through my phone, seeing what was going on in the chat. And I was waiting for my daughter to come out of the house, just sitting in the van. And she came out of the house. She's going to help me do something. So I got out of the van, and I looked down, and there's a garter like chilling in my front yard because we have this gigantic catalpa tree.
Mm-hmm.
And so I hurried up and picked it up, and I was like, hey, take my picture. I'm going to put it in the group chat. And I was like, I can go herping too, even though I live in a cold weather place. But I mean, it literally like American toads and plain old garter snakes. Like
we have spadefoot toads everywhere down here, and it's always cool seeing those, because they're just they're different from the regular toads we have. Like, but they're really common, and they're just interesting. Marbled salamanders. Mm-hmm. Aside from dart frogs, I've never been much into amphibians, but marbled salamanders are just always I've never found one. They're definitely around, but it's like you see those, man, and it's just like it's so cool that we have something like that right here. Like hognose snakes, even eastern hogs. Like the fact that we have those weird snakes like that want to be cobras and aren't, and they play dead, and it's just like, I don't know, man. There's just, like I said, I try to keep in mind anytime we're out and about herping and stuff. It's like someone would love to be doing this right now. So take full advantage of it and enjoy it.
Oh, yeah. Well, even from that perspective of just seeing what they do. Like we have a set of garters that live in and around that giant tree. And then we have a pretty substantial garden in our backyard, and there's always toads and stuff around, but we have a set of garters that live back there. And there are times of year where, and it'll be pretty quick here and then it's getting warm, where there are male garters running around all over my neighborhood and back and forth between my front and backyard. And I know there's at least one girl who frequents somewhere around here. Mm-hmm. And like you can hang out on my front porch or sit on my back deck and like just watch them. Like we use railroad ties to separate our garden from the yard because I have the tortoises. And like, dude, they'll be in and out of the little levels of the railroad ties, like just doing garter snake stuff. Mm-hmm. And and I have 3 kids, and ever since they were little, like they were trying to figure out like, hey, I bet you that girl's somewhere. Cause you just see heads like,
it's
like
what's going on? What's going, and cause when they were little, we would find them, and they always thought they were babies, or they were always looking for the mom and the babies because they're kids. And I was like, no, these are all boys. Like these are all grown garter snakes. They just don't get very big. And they're like, what? And I was like, girls are way bigger. You'll know if we ever find her. And then we start explaining, like, oh, they come in groups and they're looking for her, and she's the only one, and so on and so forth. And so now, man, like, dude, my oldest is 15, like, and she's just your stereotypical 15-year-old girl. But we were hanging out by the van, like, hey, watch this thing climb up this catalpa tree and do all the weird garter snake stuff. And because they know, like, that girl's not awake yet. It's just now got warm. He's just wandering around looking for food. And I was like, yeah, probably. But
Yeah.
She knows garter snake natural history, which has no bearing to the rest of her life at all. You know?
Yeah, it's I think about it's funny you say garter snakes, and like I would like to get a group of like Agurnia, like the smaller Agurnia skinks, because I remember Zach Bias kept a group of them. I can't remember what species he kept, but again, just these little brown skinks, and he had like, big Exoterra or whatever. And he had like this group that lived in there. And like, I went over to his place and saw his stuff. And again, I'm looking at the snakes. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, carpet, this, that. Yeah. All right, cool. But I keep getting drawn back to this cage because I'm just watching them interact, and just to be able to see that. I see that with the Kims and the Yakis, because they're together, and just how like, one is the one in charge, and it's, I don't know, it's just cool to watch this how they interact with each other, and I just love it. Yeah.
Yeah, Nathan brings up a good point in the chat, because he talked about there are large skinks there up there in Pennsylvania that nobody sees, and he's talking about broadhead skinks. Those are everywhere down here. Like males get friggin' big, and they're really cool to see and to watch. Like if I sit on our front porch, I'll watch like a small one, or maybe there's a small group of them sometimes, like watch them chase bugs. And like if I sit completely still, it's like I'm not even there. Even I took a picture the other day, like in our backyard, there's a tree that's like dead but somehow still alive. It's like hollow in the middle. I don't know how it works, but there's always at least 3 or 4 basking in this one little area on that tree. And like it's typically like one adult male, and then there's a couple of females. And sometimes I'll just stop and I'll watch them, and they're doing their thing too. And that's another one of those things where it's like they're very common down here. They're not hard to find, but up there, it's probably a completely different story. And so it's
yeah.
Like an adult male broadhead is an impressive little lizard, dude. Like they're pretty freaking diesel.
See, that's brought up, and I don't even know they exist. I don't even know what they look. I don't even know what they are.
Big,
and again, they're in my backyard. And it's
bright
just
red heads
shame
and
on
brown
me.
bodies.
Shame.
It literally is the North American version of your blue tongue. It's
right.
It's a bulldog headed skink. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's just they're so cool. So many.
There was
cool
one day I was
say.
eating at a Subway, and there was a male anole trying to fight his reflection in the window right in front of me. I must have sat at that Subway for like a half hour just watching this fool do his thing, man. It was hilarious. Like he was like bobbing and doing push-ups, and it's like completely oblivious that the lizard is doing the exact same thing he is, and he can't figure it out. But it was just. That's another one. Those are everywhere down here, and it's funny to watch, especially if you have like a heavily planted sort of garden area. They're usually a ton in there, and like watching the males like bob at each other from a couple feet away, and then like one of them will sort of head the direction of the other one, and he'll get close, but then the other one turns around and runs, and it's like just watching that interaction. It's just it's just fun. Like it's better than a lot of television.
Yeah, 100%.
Right.
Bet money on who's gonna win, and
well, there's a reason that stuff with David Attenborough is some of the most heavily watched television ever. I mean, it is fascinating. That's the best part about it, and it's cool. Like, dude, even in the chat, man, there's people talking about field guides. Like, there are definitely folks that share the same interest, which is awesome.
Yeah. I think, I think the people that are really love reptiles, I think want to do like, I think for me, it was like always like not knowing how to do herping or like
Mhm.
keeping lizards or things, that sort of like kept me from doing it. And I wasted so many years of putting things off. And, now it's like trying to play catch up.
Yeah.
If I'm lucky, maybe I got another 40 years or so, and it's like that's a limited amount of time. And when my time's over, I want to say, man, I went on some awesome, really cool adventures and really got to soak in this planet that we're living on,
Mhm.
because like, sometimes again, being in Australia and you're sitting there I remember when the night we found the Owen Pelly and we sat on the top of this rock in Nerlangi, and you have all of us in four corners and we just sort of are alone with our thoughts of just sort of like just taking it in and thinking like, wow, I guess we are just a bunch of monkeys spinning around on a rock through space. It's just like when you again, because we're so we don't see it per se, um because of light pollution and all this. But then
Yeah.
we even sort of saw it in Texas. I don't ever get to see that, so maybe you guys do, but I don't ever get to see that. And when I saw it, it's like, holy shit. Like,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Especially when you just turn off the flashlights and it's like a full moon or
yeah.
something. You can just see everything. It's almost like it's
Yeah.
daylight.
Yeah. But I think we all have that want to sort of, I mean, we just love the reptiles and what they do. We're fascinated by them, right?
Mhm.
I mean, I guess that's what it is at the end of the day. To see it instead of seeing David Attenborough talk about it, see it right in front of your face and take it in, even if it's in your
Yeah.
backyard, is great. Scott's just lucky because he gets to have carpet pythons in his
Yeah.
backyard, blue tongue skins.
Yes. Some people are cheating.
Yeah. He
Well,
would call
that's
them
like,
crappets, but
yeah, don't even appreciate it. No. But that's the thing too, is like, and you guys have talked about it a little bit too, when you had gone on different herping trips and spoken in different episodes, is and to just go, like,
Yeah.
like you were saying, you put things off or what have you, and everybody does that, but
sure.
when, and especially having the kids, kind of colors it a little bit for me, of when we go do stuff like that and people are like, oh, that's really cool, and exposing your kids and so on and so forth, like, how do you guys do whatever it is? And that's always been Teresa and I's answer. And I've always thought it was kind of weird, of like, yeah, we just go, like,
Yeah.
whatever that thing is, like. And because now, some things have expenses or what have you, but like, for like local stuff, like, no, we just show up. Like,
Mhm.
it doesn't cost any money. Like, Chris, Pain Chab, he's a huge Pituophis guy, and I live by Kankakee, and so when we would be
That would
messaging
be
back and
cool
forth,
as hell to see those in the wild.
see, but that's like, yeah, I just go. And they're like, what are you talking about? What do you mean? And it's like, well, it's up there like half hour, then you just get out and walk around. You'll
Yeah.
probably see one. I don't know. Like,
Right.
but Australia and things, of course, it's a little different and requires planning and things like that. But so many folks, like, it never occurs to them, like, hey man, there's a whole highway system that we built in the 40s and 50s. Like, you can just go to Texas. Like that, like there is a cost associated and things like that, of course. But if you have the financial ability, then yeah, man, like, you can just straight up go. Like, it helps that have buddies who know where to go and you can plan things and so on and so forth. But like, you straight up could
Dropstone is
grab
a
a field.
luxury.
Well, yeah. But I mean,
Yeah.
you could
Yeah.
get a field guide and go to
My
Big Bend and
secret
go check it out.
assassin.
Like that, or when Chris and those
Yeah.
guys who are in the Southwest and have access to those national parks and things like that, like, Yo, man, you don't even need the field guide. Like Starved Rock is a really big one up here that's on the river and has bluffs and stuff. You can go there, take a picture. They have a field guide poster layout because it's a state park. You can just take a picture of that thing and then go try to find what they say lives there
Yeah.
in their park. And when
Yeah.
it gets dark, they'll kick you out. That's it. That's, you know.
And I think that's the cool thing about lizards, right? You see them during the day. Yeah, well, some of them. I mean, geckos and stuff you're seeing at night, and there's some species, I guess, that you see at night. But a lot of what we saw during the day was lizards. Basking on a rock, or this chuckwallas, and all these cool things that yeah, they're just right there. You just gotta go. You guys got to do it. And it's funny. And maybe I'm thinking of it in a different way, or maybe I'm just into it so much, but we spend a lot of money on our reptiles, right? We want a certain species. It costs X amount of dollars. I've spent a lot of money on snakes and reptiles over the past years. And you can take some of that money. Yeah, Australia might be expensive, or Borneo or Costa Rica or whatever floats your boat, but like, just do it. Just do it.
Mm-hmm.
Just whatever species you love, just make it happen. Even if it is in your own backyard, right? To what you're saying, just get in your car and just drive to a spot. You can go on all these iNaturalists or whatever and sort of get a feel for where sightings have been. And, you can go there and spend the day. Like, there's an area that's not too far from me that I want to go to, because they have all these water snakes there. And I've never seen a water snake in the wild, and it would be cool to sort of add that to the list of a Pennsylvania water snake to put it on there. So just got to do it.
Well, I've always thought that was funny, especially with Justin having the reference for dart frogs and stuff. Is, man, if like do either of you guys listen to Amphibicast? For a
little bit. I haven't. Yeah.
Man,
I've heard it.
Some of the people he has on have amazing setups. It's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
I know what that probably cost, right? Like, just don't set up your next dart frog tank, and you could definitely fly to Peru. Like, you got, you're talking about dudes that are building state-of-the-art LED, just outstanding things. One of those, man. And
that's why I want to go to Costa Rica. Like, I want to see frogs. Like, the snakes and stuff would be an awesome bonus, but it's like, if I'm going to Costa Rica, I'm looking for frogs. Like, that's
I think where I what I regret about my Australia trips in the past have been that I wasn't necessarily as into lizards as I am now. So when I was there, seeing, different monitors and different geckos and stuff, it was sort of like, except the Mertens, that was another, like, seeing a group of Mertens monitors in a park, and you're like, what the hell? And they're following you around, and like, there's a girl over here, and then they have this big jungle that goes off to the left here, and they're just coming down out of the, because I guess they think that people are going to feed them, and here's the male pops his head out of the water, and you're like, oh my god, it's a big freaking dinosaur! Like, what is going on? Oh my god, it's that How could I forget them? And
how hard are you kicking yourself for just completely walking by that Strophaurus and not even giving it like a second thought?
Yeah.
Didn't y'all see some of those when you were there? Like,
well, yeah. I mean, that's the sort of the blackhead stick story, right? I wanted to get a snake on the board, and we're driving, and next thing you know, I yell out, "Blackhead!" And it's just like we jump out of the car and I run, and it's just a stick that had like the bands of like what a blackhead would look like. And I'm like, son of a bitch. And then I turn around, and here's this Strophaurus gecko just sitting right on the stick, just like they do when I'm watching, Frank's videos, or, anybody that's big time in, or even Nipper now, he's sending me pictures of like, why don't you have these, you moron? Why don't you have these? You will love them. And, but like, I saw it, I looked at it, but I didn't look at it the same way that I'm looking at the black-headed python that we found
Yeah.
later, or the Owen Pelly python or whatever. It's just, but
Sure.
now I wish I would have, you know what I mean? I wish I would have just sat there and said, check this out. This is the coolest gecko ever, you know?
Yeah,
And
they are.
yeah, I did say that when I was coming back, I kept saying that would be a species that I would want to get into, because they're just such cool little geckos.
That whole group is just ridiculously interesting.
Right.
Mhm.
And then you realize that there's so many different species. You're like, wait a minute. Oh my God.
Yeah, and like we only have literally like not even a third of them in the States. There's like a whole nother
Yeah.
ugh.
And you know, I hear, like, you know, Scott's in the chat, but I hear him, or he would come on NPR, or he would be on, you know, THP or whatever, and he would be talking about these different species, and like I sort of be like, what is he talking about? I should know this. I love Australia. Why don't I know this? You know, and then you look it up and you're like, oh wow, that is so cool. And it's just, I don't know, just that, and I guess that's where, you know, like, you know, THP influences me, because, like, you know, NPR, I don't really listen to myself. I'm listening to those podcasts as I edit it, edit that, you know, all the different ones that are on the network. So it's not like I listen to them, but it's sort of like listening to your group, right? So where I really like listening to Snakes and Stogies, you know, yeah, again, you were talking earlier with the banter between Justin and Phil, and it's just like, what are they talking about? I'm just like constantly on Google as I'm listening to them, like, wait a minute. You know, they're just rattling it off like it's nothing. And I'm just like, oh, well, I know about carpet pythons. Like,
Yeah.
It's funny how it goes both ways, I guess.
What's it like to edit stuff?
To edit? Oh,
I don't know how you do it, dude, because like I told Jake, I was like, look, I just had this conversation with someone that lasted 2.5 hours. I sure as hell ain't about to go back through it and listen to it again and edit out stuff. It's like it just did it. Intro, outro, export, upload, be done. So when like you add another show, I'm like, why does he do this to himself? what is it's like, man, he's a real sick pup. Like he must really enjoy the punishment of editing, because I'd rather freaking gouge my eyes out than edit stuff. Videos.
I guess the work. Yeah, I guess the work part of it is just, I accept that. I think that each one of us, everybody in the hobby, sort of has to figure out what niche you have and what are you going to leave to the next group of herpetoculturists coming into it. And I can't write books. I can't, you know, I'm not on that level, but what I can do is I can talk to people that are passionate about reptiles and introduce some of those people to the world, because maybe the people don't know about them. And, you know, now that there's so many podcasts now today, I mean, you know, back when NPR started, there was really nothing, you know, so there was Reptile Radio and that was it. So it was just a different kind of landscape. And I just feel that, like, if I can get, I mean, I feel so honored to have, you know, Warren Booth, Keith McPeak, Justin Julander, Rob Stone, you know, Owen and Alan and Kai and, you know, Nipper, and like just
The
people that
Crawdaddy.
Crawl. Yeah. How can I forget them? And Matt, you know, like April, just people that I really appreciate and admire in the hobby. And if I can give them a platform to get that, just whatever knowledge that they have out there into the ether,
yeah,
I'm happy.
Yeah.
You know, but
Yeah. That's been the, I don't know, weird but also a good thing of doing this was it, I don't know, like I didn't know if some of these people would talk to me because I don't actually know them, you know? And
yeah.
and to do it in this way, where what I like to do is more conversational, it can be a little difficult depending on personality. Some people
Yeah.
don't just fall into talking like
Yep.
that,
Yep.
you know, and
Yeah.
usually you kind of figure that out if you're messaging back and forth of, you know, if they would prefer questions or just their personality if you don't know them, and that's cool.
Right.
But like
Right.
it, the amount of knowledge that's of it, because that's the thing is we were talking earlier, like Facebook groups and stuff, is and Justin kind of said it of nobody wants to be new, right? It in this era, like keeping up with the Joneses is information.
Mhm.
And because now
Yeah.
I can get all the information. And so I have to have it, or otherwise I'm dumber than the person making the comment. And I can't be as dumb as that person because
Right.
they're some dumb Facebook person. And that kind of thing. Whereas like the people that you're listing off, or you talk to Justin and Phil about Venomous, and they talk to Cody or talk to these guys, like the knowledge level is crazy.
Mhm.
But then how do you share it? Like it in book format and things, like you're kind of limiting who's going to have access to some of those
Mhm.
things. Like, are you going to read a bunch of forum posts and then sift through the stupid comments? And
Yeah.
it can make things difficult because of the format that human beings have chosen to communicate with each other now. Whereas in the
Yeah.
podcast thing, man, like for both of you, and then Eric, yours lasting longer, of course, but like the body of work for knowledge that is preserved and then shared is astounding. Like it's incredible. And it's really cool
Yeah.
that you guys with the two networks, and especially like NPR kind of starting it out for everybody to follow, have normalized it kind of, I guess. Like this is a normal way to communicate and for people to gather information, to where now these people who are highly educated, very experienced, are coming to this platform and they're going to talk to us.
Mhm.
So now, like, instead
Yes.
of just messaging Keith and asking him something on Facebook, I can maybe message him like, "Oh, hey, it was really cool that thing you did. I'd love to hear about it." And then now he can go talk to his co-host and be like, "Yeah, and then tomorrow we're going to talk about this thing." And I was
Yeah.
messaging with Bill, and that's pretty cool. And then I'll get to hear the whole story. And now anybody
Uninterrupted
else,
and without any of the other
Right.
static, you know.
right? It's dude, it's incredible. And then that so many people now are willing to engage in that way. Like that can only help us. That we'll be able to have that information shared in that way.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah. It was. No, go ahead, Justin.
I was gonna say it's cool too when you have people that haven't done podcasts before and you come up to them and you say, hey, you know, we really want to get you on the show, and you know, I usually tell people, here's a link, check it out. If it's something you're interested in, let me know. And you know, guys like Alex England, who's like the Bush Viper guy, he had never been on a podcast until we had him on. John Lasseter just messaged me. He was hanging out with Chris, I guess, a night or two ago, and he wants to come on one of the shows, which is kind of a big deal because he's one of those guys that just doesn't do podcasts really. And so I don't like that. To me, that's a sign that like we're doing something right. You know, if they're
Yeah.
because I do think there's with some of them, especially sort of the older school guys that aren't into the internet stuff, you know, Facebook and all that, like for them to be like, yeah, okay, I checked it out and I'm willing to do it. It's like, okay, we're doing something right then, because you know, I know with as many podcasts as there are and stuff, like I can see people being apprehensive to sort of come on and just with strangers and give out information and stuff that maybe they would consider sort of proprietary. But I don't know. I love it, and that's like I said, that's a good sign to me that it's like, okay, we're on the right track. Like we're doing, you know, we're not drifting from the sort of the point of what we're doing here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, because it was somewhat of a challenge in the earlier days to sort of get people on. You know, we're talking 2011.
Was it because
And
they didn't like get it? Where they were like, what, we're gonna sit and talk about
a lot
snakes
of
for an hour, or like
yeah, like a lot of people didn't even know what a podcast was. So
Mhm.
that's kind of why I called it radio, you
Yep.
know, because at the time it was
Made
sort
more
of
sense.
like, yeah, it was it was more of a connection that people could could make. And, you know, I mean, I think of like capturing Rico Walder
Yeah.
on a podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know the sound is shitty, and I know, we were kind of, newbies and stuff like that, but just to be able to have a conversation with him and talk to him about chondros. I mean, can you think of anybody better that you would want to talk to about chondros? And to have that now there forever is pretty awesome. I think Terry Phillip, he's another one. And I forgot to mention Chuck, Riley, and Lucas. But
does Chuck count as an intern?
No, Chuck does not count as an intern. No.
Oh, I can't wait to listen to the next Reptile Fight Club where he says something about that. That's going to be great.
He's gonna, he's gonna leave it in his outro. I love his outros, man. I friggin' love them. I told him the other day, I was like, there's something about like everyone is different, and I love that like people put their own spin on the idea. It's like we started. Really, we copied Reptile Radio, but we were not talking about ball pythons. We were talking about carpet pythons, and
right.
To see all these different formats and different ways to do it and different ideas that people have that they come up with is pretty cool. It's pretty awesome to see it evolve the way it has to. I mean, come on, right? If you're driving in your car, if you're working out, if you're in your reptile room, like you can be learning about, stuff that you didn't even know that you didn't even know.
Mental multitasking.
Yeah.
Things like this are the idealized version of what people wanted technology to be.
1,000%.
My car's going to drive me to work, and while it's doing that, I could be making toast or whatever. Like this is the intellectual version of that. Like I have a really long commute for my job, and that's what I do. I listen to so many different podcasts, almost entirely about reptiles and amphibians. And I'm just sponging it all up, whatever it may be. Amphibicasts. I listen to a couple about invertebrates. I listen to all of the THN stuff, all the NPR stuff. It just on and on and on. And now anybody can do that. And there is
it's free,
I guess, to the information.
There's no paywall, at least
for
99% of it,
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and then kind of like Eric just said, you can't write books. This is what you can do. You can provide this to the overall notion of herpeticulture. And on the book side, I think Bob Ashley is really helping out with a lot of this stuff where like some of these old school dudes are doing books now, like Trumbauer and those guys are writing books, which is really cool because that preserves that information. But for this format, I think it's an easier way to, you're basically doing the memoir. Like to me, like I never met Rico, but that's the closest thing I have to his memoirs of chondros. Like I can go listen to what he thought. This is what he happened. He had a conversation and that's what he said. Like it's just as if you had that conversation with him or you got to be there, and how you preserve those things. Like for a lot of these old school dudes who, because the way herpeticulture first started, where it was very insular and it was like three dudes in a White Castle parking lot trading king snakes or whatever. If you don't know those guys, you're never going to know where Apalachicola kings came from or whatever it may be. But if you can get that dude to, when I went to Pinellas Sands and found that king snake and boy, it was yellow or whatever. And so now you do a podcast with them. So when that older set does eventually pass away, or when all of us do, you'll know all the weird turtle stuff me and my son did for the last 20 years because I'll tell you about it. So now if you go find a red-eared slider or something, you can figure it out like that. And then doesn't have to be a 8-shelf library of dozens and dozens of titles, and and it's just a different way to do it. You know what I mean?
I think I see 50 Shades of Grey on there. Right above his head.
Shh. Damn it! I was supposed to turn that around.
Twilight?
Yeah, I mean, I love vampires. What do you want? No, well, shit, man. This is how I met Rob Stone, right? Rob was on Reptile Radio talking about rhino rat snakes, and I was like, man, that guy really knows his
He's from
shit.
another
Who
planet.
is this guy? I'm
Yeah.
like, well, who is this guy? And Rob was a huge fan of Reptile Radio, and so was I. So he, I started the NPR, and like when Reptile Radio was on, I was constantly asking those guys questions. So, here's Eric Burke again asking about carpet pythons, like, if he would have a carpet python person on, I'm like, oh my God, it's freaking out. And it's just made my Sunday drive all that much better. But, Rob reached out to me, and then we started talking, and now he's family, he's family to me. I go on 4 vacations a year with him. You know what I mean? It's more than I go on with my wife. But yeah, man, we've been every herping trip except the last Arizona one. We've been on together, and I don't know if I would have ever met him if not for doing the podcast.
Yeah.
And you talk about the old school guys, and we're that was the whole idea of the herp history, and getting that back and going, and like to be able to talk to Dr. Richard Ross, the guy that wrote the Blue Bible. I mean, that's the go-to of my generation of herpers for pythons and boas. I mean, there's no better. And then he's texting me like every day, like, hey, Eric, I didn't tell you the story about this. And if you wanted to know about that, and it's just like, this is the guy that figured out how to breed white-lipped pythons on accident. And I'm getting to talk to him. Like, it's a I'm not worthy moment. Like, holy shit, I can't believe this, but
no, I mean,
awesome.
I can say the same, that I don't think I'd know or talk to probably a solid 90% of the people I do if it weren't for the podcast stuff. And, guys like Rob and Matt Most and, Dr. Loafman and stuff like that I just have immense respect for across the board. It's like, I could just message them anytime to ask, pick their brain or even just bullshit with them. And it's like, I'm trying to think of who the first person was that was the case for, like, me and Jake, where we were like, dude, it might, just the surprise of like, we had him on the show and now we just text him.
Yeah.
This is just like Iper, we'll be doing cookies and he'll be like, send me the link. And it's like, okay, Scott Iper, and Australia wants to come on the show. It's like, and we can do it within seconds. And it's just like, it blows me and Phil's mind all the time that like, that's kind of the point we're at as far as just technology and stuff. But
every time that guy talks, I learn something.
Yeah.
And it may be because of Australia, and I'm super fascinated with it. But like every single, he can be talking about venomous geckos, whatever podcast, lizard, it doesn't matter. Like, there's always some little nugget of information that I take away from that. And I hope that that's what, our podcasts do, right? Even if it's just that little teeny bit that gets your brain going and thinking, like you're not thinking that way. And like, I get a lot of times, like, people would say, I never thought I would breed this python species. And, I listened to this episode with X guest, and look, I produced a clutch, and it's just like, wow. Okay. Then we did help herpetoculture in some kind of way, it's getting that guest on to talk about their experiences and putting it out there into the world for everybody to hear. It's just, I don't know. It's an awesome thing, man.
So with your dad, though, in particular, when he had stuff, was it mostly snakes, or was it a combination of snakes and lizards and other stuff?
I would say that my dad was probably a lot like Bill, where he had a little bit of everything. I mean, he had, oh my gosh, Easterns, Diamondbacks, Western Diamondbacks, Cobras, I think he had a Mojave rattlesnake. He had a sidewinder. He had the snapping turtle, tegus, copperheads, Indian pythons, ball pythons, soft shell turtles,
See, what I've heard you
iguanas,
describe though
geckos.
was your dad was back in the day where like it's straight up like you knew a guy. And like he went over there like,
Yes.
yeah, I know a guy and he's got a turtle, and then you'd get a turtle, and it
Yeah.
was but it was just
Yeah,
a
I got a
way
turtle guy.
different. But like but old school herpetoculture was like that because it wasn't as popular. It was more of like an underground thing of you had to have a buddy who was into that. Then they knew some dude who was kind of sketchy that did import export, and he would also get animals as like bycatch. And then one of your
Yeah.
friends that was into that but went to that guy for plumbing supplies also got frogs or whatever. Like
Yeah, it was funny when I was a kid, we would go to this pet shop, and in the pet shop was just a normal pet shop, and you would go to this back door, and you would knock on the door,
3 times.
and yeah, it was like a
The password.
special knock or whatever,
Like a speakeasy.
and then you would come in there, and you would just walk into this room of just every possible reptile you could imagine is there. And I wish I could go back in time and see it now as an adult, because
right.
I bet you I saw things that I don't even know that I saw, because I mean I was like 6-7 years old, like
Yeah.
to go to like Martin's Aquarium, and like then they're talking about it in the Lizard King or Stolen World, and it's like, wow, that was like 15 minutes from my house. That's crazy, but like, again, to go in there and just see all these different things. And I guess that's how it was, right? You went in and it's like, you'd say, yo, Joe, what, you got any new reptiles? Yeah, we got this thing in, blah, blah, blah. And next thing you know, we have a tree boa, or, a snapping turtle, or, he even had crocodilians at one point. He had, not saying that he probably should have, but it was a different time back then.
Well, dude, even now, like having like those things, our hobby is much more mainstream, but it is still a bit of a fringe thing for a lot of stuff. Like having the connections that I have made with the rescue folks, and then having the facility and more institutional folks and things like that. Like I'm very aware that when sometimes people offer me stuff that they probably didn't offer somebody else, or like there's only 4 or 5 of us that get that text of,
Yes.
hey, I got this
Yeah.
thing going on, what do you think? And in
Right.
my case it's usually because it's larger species or things that would require a facility, but it it is still that way of there are still a lot of things where you got to know a guy, and or
Oh
even
yeah,
to
100%.
but even for somebody like yourself where you you have projects, and I hear the way that you guys talk about certain projects of like, oh yeah, oh, well, with so and so, and then we traded this, and this is what we're going to do, and it it is very insular because maybe some of the things that I've heard you describe, you have things in the vein of trying to keep the history of some things that
Yeah.
just not a lot of folks have.
Yes.
And so it
Yeah.
becomes much more important of, oh, I got to talk to Nick, or this one thing is with Owen or what have you, because of how the project fell out over the years or something of that nature, to where
Sure. Sure.
I can't just give this one away. Like this girl has got to go over here because there's, it is very specific still for some things.
Oh yeah. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Even, I think of, me and Billy are big time stripe people, big time carpet stripe people. And, the Peterson line of striped
Yep.
coastal carpets was kind of like lost. And between, I don't really know of too many people other than really me, Billy, and Owen that are really kind of working with it. And, we're sending animals to each other all the time. You know, it's and then like as I'm moving out of the morph stuff and getting out of it, I know Billy's sort of still into that kind of stuff, and I'm sitting here going like, I'm just gonna send him a box. Hey Billy, you want this? You want this? You want this? You want this? Okay, it's coming your way, you know. And you know, I don't know. I find much more. I don't know about you guys. It's not that I don't like selling reptiles. I don't enjoy the selling of reptiles to people that I don't know, because I guess it really comes down to time, right? You know, doing all these podcasts and editing and how you do it. I just really don't have the time to devote what that needs to be. Which is why I sort of don't really post on EB Morelia stuff and stuff like that, because I just don't have the time, and my passion has sort of shifted from selling snakes. I find much more enjoyment out of just giving snakes to people that really will appreciate what they're getting. You know, like, oh, you want an IJ? Take this one. Oh my God, that one's killing you.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just,
no, I mean,
awesome.
I feel the same way. You know, there's like Dr. Loafman. He's done so much for me in terms of hooking me up with species I never think I'd ever have.
Right.
That I you know, it's like a pay it forward kind of thing.
Exactly.
But it is also that thing where you get just as excited or just as pumped for somebody that's excited to have that, you know, to where you can just be like, you know, I know you like these. I know you truly appreciate them. Here you go. And just, you know, knowing that you made someone's day. I don't know. I get just as much enjoyment out of that as I do selling stuff.
I feel like the more and more I think about it, the more and more I think that I should have probably pursued the whole talking to kids about reptiles as like something that I did, rather than try to sell reptiles to people on the internet.
Right.
Because you know, the one carpet fest we had, there was this kid and he was just like, he was so excited about carpet pythons. And I was like, pick whatever one you want, man. Pick whatever one you want. And he picks this striped Brettles, and I'm just like, it's yours, you know? And he's just like, really? And I'm like, yep, it's yours, you know? And just that, I know that kid is going to remember that, and he's going to go into the reptile hobby in a positive way. And it's, you know, and he's going to get to experience something that he's really excited about. So maybe that will ignite a passion in that 10-year-old kid that maybe you couldn't do any other way, you know?
Yeah. We have an organization here that helps like women and children get out of like abusive relationships and stuff, abusive parents, husbands, whatever. And every year they do like this Christmas tree thing. And so you pick a kid's name and it gives a list of stuff they want. And my sister, this is a couple years ago, my sister found a kid who just wanted books on reptiles. And I just happened to have a ton of books that were, I had already read them. I didn't need them anymore. And so one of them was actually the first edition of Vin Rousseau's Boa book. And so I just, and so I put them all in the box, gave it to my sister, and I think I threw in like a little pocket hook or something that I had that I wasn't using, and I was like, here you go. Like, I don't, you know, stuff like that. Like if someone says, hey, I got a kid who really wants to get into this stuff, it's like, you want a corn snake? I got you. Like, whatever, you know.
And that kid may never keep reptiles in his or her entire life. But I bet you they have appreciation for nature, and I bet you that maybe they'll think twice about, you know, before running over a snake or you know chopping its head off because it's in your yard or something like that, you know. So
I don't know how many books I gave him, but it was a big old box full of them.
Book. Oh no!
And now, anytime I see that book, I just think of that, and I'm like, man, I really hope that kid enjoyed that book. Damn.
Oh, that's great.
Well, dude, that was the last birthday party that I just did the other day. This little girl was turning 4, and her mom booked me to do the party. I'm like, that's cool. And I knew, like, when they're that young, you can bring a rhinoceros, and after 10 minutes, they'll ask where the cupcakes are. Like, they're too little,
right?
You know,
right.
So we're doing the show or whatever, and she wanted, does everything like me, and did she pet it, and then man, like half the show she just chased my Redfoot around. And then and her parents were like, yeah, I don't really think she's gonna sit, or like the, it, I'm sorry. And I was like, dude, I don't care. Like, I
Yeah.
got a water monitor. I put my water monitor on the leash. We walked around her pool. I don't care. Like
Should have let it get in the pool.
but like she doesn't need a natural history lesson or for me to explain hypomelanistic bull snakes. Like, she just wants to follow the
Right.
Redfoot. Like, that's cool. Let's go chase the Redfoot. And then I put the Redfoot away, and she just walked. She got to hold the leash for the monitor. I thought she was going to die. Like,
Right.
whatever, man. It's,
It's another positive experience that even just recently from reptiles is my sister has gotten into reptiles. And she started with geckos, and I think that's all she has. She doesn't have any snakes. It's all lizards. It's geckos and skinks and stuff like that. But I mean, we were close. She's my sister, but now our relationship is even closer.
Mhm.
Like, I'm talking to her pretty much every day, and like, she's has this. She got me together last weekend, and she's trying to pitch this idea that we should open up a plant reptile shop thing. And
yeah.
she's like, like, and then we started talking, and I said to her, I said, because she's like a plant whisperer thing. She has like so much knowledge about plants. And I said, and now that she has reptiles, I was telling her, not that I want another podcast to do, but I was like, man, that is such a niche of podcast that is not out there.
Yeah.
What plants go with what reptiles? And if you're setting it up, what are some tips of like caring for that plant so that it thrives in the enclosure and stuff, and we even got to start to talk. And then she's telling me, like, some people in the plant world, they don't even keep a reptile in it, but they'll have an enclosure like a dart frog tank where it's just like all these, plants
Yep.
that they have. And again, all these different worlds that open up to you when you sort of step outside of your comfort zone.
Yep.
Yeah, my middle daughter is the same way. She's very into invertebrates and has now gotten very into plants. Our whole dining room is, I don't even know how many different plants there are in there, but she came with me when I went to Georgia and met up with all the THN guys, and that was the only thing that we got there. The only thing we went and purchased were plants. And then I picked up stuff from Black Box and met with the guys, and her whole thing was, did you see the thing? That dude's got dart frogs over there, but the plants and this whole and just lost it. And I was like, yeah, cool. All right, let's get some plants, man. And it's the same way. And well, you could put this one in that thing. And then what if we were doing this? You know how you have that one lizard? I think we could put one of those. And all right, man, like, let's go. When you see somebody else's like that level of interest just based off of what you're doing. Like, oh yeah, that tarantula setup's cool and that's fun, Dad. But like, did you know that we could put and then just ramps off of the edge? And it's like, okay, so what you're really into is this part. Like, you just think that our part is fun. Like,
right. Yeah, like, she got me in. I'm into plants now too, kind of, somewhat. And first, I'm trying to keep them alive outside of a reptile tank, and then we'll see what happens when you put them into a tank. And I don't even know if a lot of my stuff would even have plants other than like pothos or stuff. But I found out that there's an Australian pothos called Cebo Blue, and I was like, okay, well, I need that, So now I have all this, Australian pothos growing around. And there's this other one that she turned me on to. It's like this rattlesnake plant.
Yep.
And just watching that, like, it moves its leaves to get sun, or in different parts of the day, and you're like, what the hell?
It's a whole nother rabbit hole, man.
Yeah, man, it's crazy. Yeah, it's nuts. But that's the fun of it, right? You just keep learning.
For sure.
There's always something to learn, always something to learn.
All right, guys, we are cruising past 2 hours.
I did get into plants almost by default from Dart Frogs, so I'm semi-versed in plants, but for the most part, I'm not.
Oh yeah, but I
hardcore
mean
in.
there are people that, well, just by the nature of the enclosure, folks typically spend a little bit more money. But like some of the folks that I follow on social media, when they're posting things about their plants, they get more interaction. Like, ooh, do you have a cutting of those? And da da da.
Yeah.
And the person posting is like, yo, I breed frogs. Like, no, I bought that at a greenhouse, or whatever. That's like, you can tell where people get. And I came from the saltwater aquarium side years ago, and it was the same way where like you'd get guys that were like, did you see that one piece of coral? It was purple. And the guy's
Yeah.
like, do you know how much the fish cost in this tank? It's really expensive. And then somebody be like, yeah, that's cool, man. Congrats on your fish. Can you take a picture once it swims away? Like,
Yeah. I want the coral. Apparently, Scott thinks my destiny is Australian elapids. I
I
like it.
saw that. That
It's my
that's a
destiny.
pretty big jump from
Oh.
carpets and Odatria to Australian elapids. I feel like,
Yeah.
I don't know. You've referenced a couple of times that you're coming to it like later in life, and you kind of feel like you're playing catch up. I
Yeah.
don't know if Australian elapids is a later in life hobby. I feel like it's an
Probably not.
early in life hobby
Yeah.
where you're
Yeah.
flexible and well rested and
Yes.
have a lot of energy.
You don't wake up and things hurt like they, like, wait a minute, I didn't even know that this existed on my body. Why is it hurting? What is going on? Oh yeah. Every day is a new hurt. But yeah, I'm with you. I think that's probably right.
Yeah. Leave it to Scott though.
I'll see him in the wild.
You got to get down in the level with kids. Eric needs Australian elapids. That's a hard juxtaposition. That's
Yeah. Right on.
okay. So I'm sure everyone who listens to all of this knows, but where can folks find the two of you if they want to bother you about all your newfound lizard and plant interests?
Age before beauty.
Justin.
Palmetto Coast Exotics, Facebook, Instagram, the Herpeticulture Network. So THP Thursday nights, Snakes and Stogies live Monday nights, and I think I don't. Yeah, that's it.
ContraCast.
There's too much stuff. I'll just keep it simple.
Yeah.
I'll make it sure. ContraCast, Corn Stars, all that stuff.
I'll make it super, super easy. If you want to learn about me or the network, everything you need to know is at MoreliaPythonRadio.com. And if you want to get in touch with me, info@MoreliaPythonRadio.com. If you go there, you'll be able to see what I have personally, what Owen, all the other people, all the other podcasts, everything you need to know is all right there. So check it out.
So to end this, I would like to point out to folks, I think that is this, I guess, how this went, I suppose. Like, people would think that, like, oh, NPR started it, and then, like, Herpeticulture Network's the new version, and like, there would be some sort of weird competitiveness or what have you. And there just isn't. Like, we, you hear the separate groups, or however you want to classify them, like, reference each other, and we all text people and Facebook message, and I'm in group chats with most of the various folks who are in each group, and it's all mishmashed together. And I think that the really awesome part about that is that and you both have kind of talked about it here tonight, of all of the people that do this in these friend groups or circles of people who are working together are approaching it in different ways a little bit, and there's some different formats, and especially in the NPR, you guys have several different formats now of show. Mm-hmm. But natural history nerds. Like everybody who talks on these is a nerd of some kind, and they all have similarities in that, and they answer questions and hang out and talk, and basically everybody you can Facebook message or text, and they're all super approachable. And I just think it's really cool that, like, I've had people ask that, like, oh, do you talk to them, or is it different?
It's turf war.
Like, you know, but like, oh, like, you know, you
Like
keep
a
monitors and
Crips and
stuff. Like,
Bloods
did you
kinda
know there's
thing.
well, but like people who are not in
Yeah.
that crowd see that I have a super diverse collection and are like, oh, you know, like, do you know there's a monitor keeping podcast? And like, then you have a lizard podcast, but you keep a bunch of monitor. I'm like, yeah, it's awesome. I listen to them all the time. Like, or, you know, and there's none of that. Or, you know, like I talk about the Chameleon Academy, or I talk about just different people all the time.
Yeah.
And I just think it's really cool that in this particular aspect of reptile social media, a lot of the negative parts that people don't like, you know, people don't like YouTube influencers and they kind of poo-poo Facebook groups or whatever, especially or specifically in these two network groupings, that is not a thing like that I have ever experienced.
Yeah.
And I think that's awesome.
I've never at any point felt like there was any sort of competition between, you know, I do think there was sort of this notion at some point by some people that like there was this like ladder sort of thing of shows and adding them to the network and who can have the most. And, you know, it's just, I don't know. I mean, it's like, yeah, I mean, NPR was a giant influence on us. But it's never been one of those things where it's like, man, they're doing this. Like, we gotta do this now. We gotta.
No.
They got a Colubrid show. We got to start something too. You know, it's just I've never felt like it was something that we had to keep up with. It's just like their NPR is like the uber legit information hub, and THN is like the great value brand.
I don't know about all that, but yeah, no, man.
Yeah,
there's never
minute,
been
man. Like that. The logo in the corner is no. You can't. It goes the other way. You can't be on the network saying, "Come on, man."
It's all about getting the information out there and bettering the hobby. You know, that's the goal for me.
Like I said earlier, I don't even remember how I stumbled upon THP. Probably because every once in a while, I don't do it so much anymore because there's just so many. But I think I would always just like Google reptile podcast just to see what would come up, and I think it came up, and I was like, oh, what's this? You know, and I think it's when you had the I think it was a white logo with I don't know what species of snake it was on it, but.
Oh yeah, right? That was like a cottonmouth.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So like, yeah. So I started listening to it, and then I knew you guys were into Morelia, and I was like, oh yeah, okay, cool, all right, you know. And then, yeah, it's something for me to listen to now, right? Because yeah. And no, I love what you guys do. I think it's great. You know, I listen to Lizard Brain Radio. I listen to TA, all the stuff, all of it. So.
And it was funny because I remember the first time that, at least for me, you know, when Eric was like, "Hey, you want to come on NPR?" It was like, "Holy shit, like, we made it!" Like that's the point. It's like you're there, dude. Like
I find that so weird, man, because I was asking Corey Martin to come on, and she's like, "Oh, you know," she had that same kind of response, like. I was just like, oh, we're just gonna.
And we get that now too, and it just makes me laugh because it's like, it's literally just a couple of nerds just talking about whatever, you know. But it was like, and then when you had me and Jake on, it was like, holy shit, dude, it's happening again. Like, damn,
that's awesome.
How did we pull it off? We fooled them. It worked.
We talked to Burke about Morelia, and now look at where we're at.
That's right.
It's good stuff, man. It's good stuff. No, but yeah, I do love that about the sort of the reptile podcast world. It doesn't
Mhm.
seem to be drama, competition, not out trying to outdo each other. It's just a lot of supporting each other, and it's pretty awesome that a lot of us just cross over into each
Yeah.
other's worlds all the time. So
And that somehow
Yeah.
people don't get tired of that. Having
Yeah.
this, like, that's sort of the hardest part for me is like, you guys will have someone on, and so I'll talk to Phil because we maybe they were on our hit list or something. It's like, okay, well, we'll come back to them in a couple weeks, and then it's just making sure
Yeah.
that we're not having someone on like immediately after
Right.
someone else. And
Yeah,
ask
every
them
once
all
in a
the same
while you'll have
questions, so we try to stir, keep it spaced.
right. Every once in a while you'll have somebody that does like the podcast world
Yeah,
round.
the circuit,
They'll be
Yep.
like on like like 6 different podcast shows, and it's just oh
the
well,
press tour.
probably should have held off on this one. Like, to your point, right? A couple of weeks until the magic sort of wore off, and then we can
Mhm.
hit it again. But
Yep.
it's all good.
Awesome. All right. Well, I really appreciate it, fellas.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, man.
Anytime.
Great time. Appreciate it.
I will wrap us up then.
Thank you.
do this. Okay. That was episode 34. That was awesome. Thanks you to everyone who came into the chat. And you guys heard me mention earlier that I was working on the black box cages that I got down at the show in Georgia. And so I will post updates of that. Right now, it is getting the UV lights set up how I want them to be, figuring out my heat gradient in relation to the styrofoam that I'm building for the backgrounds before I get my Zoopoxy set up. So just figuring out light and heat gradients, and then I will give you guys an update of that. Really happy with the enclosures. They've been a lot of fun. I'm like I always talk about having a facility, so I have to move stuff around, and lightweight, built really well. I can't wait to deck them out and get you guys some pictures. And I really want to see how I can play with the heat gradients in those, because I got enclosures that are fairly tall, so it should be a lot of fun. So just a lot of experimenting to come. I'm looking forward to it. So I have episodes set up through all the way through the end of summer, actually. And so we should have plenty more content for you guys. So I will see you again in another 2 weeks. Later.